Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I was, by education, I'm a software architect, even though I have never been paid by writing any code. But I was fortunate enough to be part of the build-up of the e-government in Estonia when it was this forming and storming phase, when it was booming and things were just kind of built on top of each other, and I was able to see like what works, what doesn't work, what people accept, what people don't accept. And 7-8 years into that experience, we decided that maybe it's a good idea to take that knowledge and experience and try to bring it also to other countries. And that I've been doing for the past 14-15 years. And like what I've realized or understood during that time is that the culture, the politics, the way of people are used to do things, it plays such a big part. And just taking one solution from one country and putting it in another country, it works very rarely. Usually when we need to adjust it according to the local the traditions and culture and laws and legislation. But enough about me and more about the ease of doing business, what I wanted to talk about today. I want this piece to be inspirational, aspirational. I'm going to show like what can be done with digitalization and like what, from my perspective, what the broader sense of digitalization is. But in order to set the scene and in order to get going, like for the past 7-8 years, I have been working quite a bit with different countries and governments on the topics of ease of doing business. Who doesn't know that the ease of doing business is a measurement framework defined and run by World Bank. And at least from my perspective, the biggest value of this one, it creates a common baseline that puts all the different economies on more or less on the same scale, and it brings you can compare these different economies. And maybe even more important is that you can track your own progress there. That the way how your progress is measured, it's the same way, and you can see where and how you are progressing. But now, just giving you a bit of an like interesting insights. What I have found from them, it's from this year's ranking, is that like how different the economies can be. If you take the number of steps or number of procedures that it takes to pay taxes, for example, in Bahrain, Hong Kong, and Venezuela, then the difference is 30 times. Like, it's quite significant. Like the same topic, looking into registering the property. In Georgia, it's 2 steps. In Mexico, it's 88 steps. It's kind of a staggering difference. And the same applies for this. How many or how much time does it take? Registering property in Qatar can be done in 1 day. In Mexico, it takes you almost a month. And probably the biggest difference, at least what I have noticed in this year's ranking, is that if you look at the number of days it takes to start the business in the leader, which is New Zealand, it takes a half a day or 1 day, and in Venezuela it takes 200 something. So it's like the point that I would like to make here or to illustrate is that these gaps between the leaders and laggers can be not 2-3 times, but it can be 10-fold or even 100-fold. That being said, also looking into the history of the reports and the progress that different economies or countries have made, it shows that the fast progress or leapfrogging it is possible. Just only last year there were 4 economies who jumped more than 28 places in total ranking. In sub rankings, the jumps were even bigger for some economies. So it shows that it's like if you really want to, and if you put your mind around it, then this progress is possible. Doesn't really matter where you are, and it is doable. What I have seen from my experience working with different entities and economies and governments is that like if you look at this digitalization only as an IT reform, then usually this gains they tend to be rather limited. If you look a bit wider, that the digitalization can be the driver or enabler for the changes to regulatory framework, to the policy, to look into the business processes, optimize these ones, bit kind of figure out who is mandated to do what, and maybe change a bit of the responsibilities among different government entities, and then apply the IT or support the change with IT. Then these results can be much more significant. And the same figure illustrates that all these reforms which are done here, they all include digitalization component, but they all also include organizational reform and the policy reform. Digitalization without this other two, it usually doesn't yield that big of a results. So just a slogan that the quick change is possible, and I have seen it happening by myself. Hopefully, I've helped also a couple of countries to make that change. And based on that experience, that working with the clients, like I have divided the entire kind of it's always a journey, and if you get something done, then there is always something else that can be done. But I think what's especially when talking about ease of doing business, there is so much of an innovation already around the globe that just picking best solutions, best ways of doing things from different countries, combining them together, making them work in your own ecosystem, your own the legal framework. Probably that's the easiest and the fastest way. That if you want to figure out something really revolutionary and make something new, that might take some time and might convincing and a lot of a change management. But if you just look at from the perspective that let's get the best practices and let's make them work for ourselves, and that can be a pretty quick way to success. And at least what we have experienced is probably the right place to start is the regulatory review. I will go a bit more into the examples later on, like what it actually means. But just to kind of rushing maybe a bit ahead, is that most of the legislation and policies which are in force currently in the world are written, compiled, invented during the paper age. That time the digital capabilities just didn't exist what exists today. And of course, then these policies, they cannot kind of encapsulate or take advantage of these digital capabilities which are there today. So it usually makes sense to start looking at it from the regulatory perspective, like what are these regulations that really come from the paper age and maybe should be relooked in the current environment. And from there on, the next logical step is to look into the process part. That maybe there are some process steps that are not really needed anymore, which are again kind of inherited from the paper legacy. And from there on, move into the digitalization of the solution implementation, like how to actually build the e-solutions or e-services that will help the end users or government clerks or whoever kind of get things done faster and cheaper and more seamless and an easy way. And one part that I have noticed, which is quite often overlooked, is the change management itself. And I don't mean the change management as a project management topic where you're going to just keep you keep managing the scope and the budget, but the change management in a sense that it's very human to reject the change and want to keep the status quo, that everything that happened before me, that was okay. Now we're in a perfect world, and I should like to keep it that way. That's very human. All of us are thinking like that and behaving like that. And in order to kind of get out from this maybe so-called comfort zone and move to something else, something new that hasn't been there before and experienced before, it takes some sort of management. Like you need to figure out who are the champions, who can kind of start preaching it, who can start bringing this change to the larger society, and then how to deal with these people who are really resisting it, and how do I know get it actually moving. So now moving on to this very specific examples. That's kind of not to have some theoretical talk here, but they're going to put this thing in a perspective, like how these three different domains, the policy, process, and digitalization come together. And I've picked up like few topics or domains from this ease of doing business, and first one is simplifying the name registration. And I don't know exactly how it's in Belarus. I thought that I would check it out, but somehow I ran out of time. But in quite many economies and in quite many regulative frameworks, it still states that before you incorporate the company, you have to register the company's name. And this is kind of a prerequisite that you cannot move on into the incorporation if the name registration is done. And if you think about it, like why it's that way, then this is the typical example that we have inherited something from the paper world. If the company's register was kept on a paper, in the paper archive, then it just physically takes time to validate if this new company who wants to be named XYZ, is this company already registered? Is this somehow with a trademark protected? Does it apply with the naming policy, so on and so forth? Now, with the help of digitalization, this thing can be done in seconds, right? Maybe even faster. So basically in real time. So there is really no need to have this kind of a separate name registration step before you incorporate the company. But more often than not, this separate step is written into the legislation and into the policy framework. So even to make that kind of a simple step to just get rid of the name reservation, it usually takes the changing the legislation. And from organizational perspective, there might be an organizational unit whose only job is to deal with this name validation, and of course they're gonna be protecting their own turf and saying that like this manual thing needs to be there. So like that's the classical example that you have the policy change needed, you have the organizational change needed, and then the IT can enable it. Like it's not vice versa, that IT will make it happen and somehow then magically everything happens.
Peter, sorry for interrupting you. We have simple 3 minutes to finish the presentation and probably a couple of questions to raise.
Right, but then maybe let's move on to the questions, because it's another 3 examples. They illustrate more or less the same points, just from the different perspectives. So I'm happy to take your questions.
Probably the most interesting question is regarding digital signature. What are perspective for developing this technology, or this, like, to say, instrument in Estonia and other regions? How do you see this process?
I'm a very strong believer that digital signature, even though it's called digital signature, again, the digital component of it, it's quite often it's overestimated. There are so many different digital signature solutions out there. What makes it work is the regulatory framework. Like if the digital signature is not made compulsory, then it means that the adoption will be very slow. If there will be many different digital signature formats, it again means that adoption will be kind of hindered, because you cannot interchange the different documents signed by different people. And I think that nowadays we don't have that problem so much anymore. The digital signature is not considered on the same level as a handwritten signature, but it was there before, that somehow the handwritten signature is more valid or more trustworthy than the digital signature. That in that regard, like, and these are all regulatory and change management topics. Like you just need to make the law which says that the digital signature is on the same level as a handwritten signature, and it can hold in a court. And you need to educate your judges that yes, the digital signature works like that, and they need to accept the documents which are digitally signed. So it is more of this change management part, the technology part. Technology is out there, and you just can pick whatever it works best for you.